Alex, welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. It's really great to have you here today, and thank you for joining us. I wonder if we could start by you giving a bit of background about yourself and about CPI, please.
Absolutely. And firstly, thank you so much for the invite. I'm a huge fan of the podcast. So I'm Alex. I am Director of Market Strategy at CPI. Been at CPI for about 10 years now. I lead CPI's function looking at the outside world and trends, which includes things like medtech and AI and health. But CPI is part of Innovate UK's Catapult Network, which aims to drive economic and societal impact through translation of ideas to market. We've got about 700 people, and we work across healthcare, which is pharmaceuticals and medtech, materials, and also formulation.
Great. Alex, some people may not be familiar with Innovate UK. Could you just give us a few lines about what it is, just so that people are aware of Innovate UK, please?
Absolutely. So Innovate UK is essentially the UK government's way of supporting industry to translate ideas closer to the commercial market. So they essentially run funding programs, they run investor partnerships, and they run accelerators and lots of other schemes to help mainly SMEs, but also large corporates to get that support they need to get good ideas a little bit further along the development journey.
Yeah, I mean, clearly coming from an academic institution like Brunel, I'm familiar with Innovate UK, and it's doing a great job in terms of promoting AI and helping businesses. It seems to kind of get up the progression to launch and develop products. So thank you for that. Alex, AI in healthcare is a huge area, and I just wondered, from your perspective, if you could give listeners an insight into how you see AI being used in the healthcare sector, please.
Absolutely. So AI is one of these tools that is so broad in what it can do, and it can provide a lot of benefits to the health, medtech, pharmaceutical industries. But one of the ways I look at it is in terms of risk, right? So there's lots of different levels of risk within healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So if we start off with potential applications in low risk, we can use AI for things like administrative and operational support. So this could help with things like scheduling, resource management, potentially coding of clinical documents, and also potentially some chatbots to kind of help guide you through some of the questions that may be asked by a clinician, through a one-on-one type service. But then as we move more into sort of more moderate risk or higher risk, we're starting to look at things like remote monitoring, preventative care, looking for trends that we see from our biomarkers, from our wearables and so on, and looking to see whether things appear abnormal and, see if we need to make some intervention. Then we move into higher risk applications, things like decision support and risk prediction, where we're actually specifically looking at flags for things which could cause patient harm if the AI or somebody gets that wrong. And then the other thing is very, very high risk, where we're actually using AI to help us make those clinical decisions. So looking at an image and seeing whether that image has cancer on the image. So there's loads of different points at which AI can be used. And some can be adopted quite easily and quite quickly because the risk is low, whereas some where at higher risk, we obviously need significant confidence that we're going to get that decision right every time and not cause patient harm.
And what are some of the markers of that of the risk here? How would you determine whether something is high or low risk?
It's to do with what happens if that decision is wrong. What could happen? What the harm could be? Could that harm be significant to the patient if it goes wrong, or could it be significant to a number of patients if it goes wrong? For example, if you misdiagnose, let's just pick a particular condition, HIV, that could potentially put significant people at risk if that person is positive when they've been told they're negative. And if you look at individual patient, you could be looking at image analysis, and you could be saying that patient is clear when actually they have a particular cancer. And if you miss that, then there's a problem. However, there is quite a lot of research out there, especially the image analysis, that doctors that work with AI actually can identify those concerning things on images
Hmm.
more often and more frequently than if they did it without. So it actually is helping them in a positive way. So a lot of AI is being used even in high risk. We're not just putting it in a black box and saying, give me a decision. We're actually
Yeah.
asking the AI to help the clinician. The clinician is making that final decision, which really reduces that risk.
And you've spoken now about, the use of AI, for example, in image and image analysis, but increasingly AI is being incorporated directly into medical devices. Um, what are some of the examples, or what are some of the ways in which organizations are starting to incorporate AI into medical devices?
Mm. Well, we've been told by a senior person at a large medtech organization that
Hmm.
works in diagnostics and medtech that, especially in the US, the current table stakes for a new diagnostic device is the incorporation of AI, which is
Okay.
where when you get a particular result out of that test, the AI tells you what the next possible solution on the care pathway could be. If patient A has biomarker B, then this would be the normal thing to do.
Hmm.
The doctor doesn't have to do that, but it's helping them and it's suggesting a way forward, which kind of speeds you up. In a way, it's similar to if you're writing a report. If you start off with saying ChatGPT, give me some ideas for a report, it will get you going. You don't have to use those, but it actually will help you in that direction. But we're seeing, especially in the US, quite a significant adoption of AI in medical devices. A bit less in the UK.
And and in terms of the US, what is it that's enabling the US to progress and use AI in medical devices?
There's a lot of reasons. One of which is the FDA in the US, which is their regulatory authority.
Hmm.
It has quite a strong team working in AI. They have a lot of guidance, a lot of support. They have people whose roles specifically are working in AI and helping to get AI used within medical devices. So if you want to have a product with AI within it, there's a very
Hmm.
clear set of frameworks and guidance to move forward. Also, the way that the US health and care system works is it's hospital based, it's profit center based. So so hospitals are trying to go outdo each other. They're trying to offer that better level of care, which they can
Hmm.
sometimes do with AI. Also, they're trying to save a lot of money to become commercially more viable, which AI can help with as well.
So is it is this a structural issue within the US then, because of the way in which the healthcare system there is organized?
I think it partially is, but I think in the
Hmm.
UK, we have very, very clever clinicians and doctors, just as clever as in the US.
Yeah.
But, we don't quite have the same level of digital infrastructure in our hospitals. We are a little bit behind in that. Also, our MHRA are really, really moving forward in AI. They're really pushing AI, especially with
Hmm.
the AI Airlock, and we have good access to data in the UK. But just getting AI adopted in the NHS is tough for a number of reasons. One of which is the way that the NHS pays for innovations and pays for products. They need to really see in-year savings. They can find it difficult to pay for something that might have a longer term saving, that might not give savings straight away. And what we're seeing is the UK, Innovate UK, and the NHS have spent multiple millions of pounds. If you can read this out, 113 million pounds over the last couple of years was spent in the AI and healthcare awards, which funded 86 pilot programs across the NHS. So we are trying these things out. We are actually seeing if we can get some benefit. But the problem is pilot doesn't always lead to adoption.
Yeah.
So sometimes we can see good benefits, but there is no need, no. The NHS is not forced to adopt afterwards. So we need to get those costings right. We need to demonstrate that value, and we need to actually have the NHS thinking a little bit longer term rather than in-year savings every time.
Yeah. And Alex, if I could just rewind just for a bit and just ask you to explain something you said, which is you used the phrase the NHS airlock, I believe. Could you just explain to the listeners what you mean by the NHS airlock, and for those who may not be aware of what that is and how it works?
Yeah, so the AI airlock is actually something which has been created by the MHRA,
Okay.
which allows you to take something which may potentially be a higher risk model and use
Mhm.
it within an environment similar to how you would find within a UK hospital system or a UK data set. So you can show that this model behaves correctly before you actually deploy it properly. So this is something which we've pioneered in the UK. we are, one of the first countries to do this. We don't have to do this. We are not. We do not have to follow the European Union AI regulations, which requires an airlock before you deploy, but it's best practice and we're moving forward. Also, this helps us as a regulatory authority, the MHRA, to try something new and more risky. One of the real goals of the MHRA, especially after the UK exit, after Brexit, is for us to become a very pro-innovation regulatory authority. So we're trying to make the UK the best place in the world to try and develop and test new products and services, which includes AI.
So is the airlock a bit like a sandbox? Is this where organizations can come in and try something out in a safe environment to see what it means?
It absolutely is, because all regulation is based on risk and efficacy. So if you can prove, one, that it works, efficacy, and two, that it is safe, risk, then you're more likely to get it regulated. And then once it's regulated, it can be deployed. And to actually get that evidence, a sandbox is a really, really good way to do that.
Yeah. And so the MHRA, they actually participate in those developments, and then those kind of in trying these new devices out.
Yeah, they work closely with innovators to do that. They're clearly limited in their resources, so they can't test every single AI that's possible, but they do reach out frequently to innovators and ask for examples of challenges to solve. And they always have a multiple set of AIs kind of running through their AI airlock at any one time.
Okay. So what is it that the UK can do, Alex, to catch up, if not, go past and exceed what the US is doing in terms of using AI in healthcare?
So I think we're on the right track. So what we've done is we've actually followed the US by setting up CERSIs, which is the Centers for Regulatory Science. Now, this essentially is mainly university-led groups that are looking at those challenges within regulation and helping the UK regulator to understand how to regulate in that area and how to understand those new things, those new potentially risky innovations. The US has had some for a while, and we've just started developing ours. That is one way in which we're going to really, really start to move forward. The second is we really need to continue to support the MHRA. The MHRA themselves, they have funding, but they do need more support and more funding if they are to be able to support innovators more. So working with the CERSIs and continuing to support the CERSIs, and also helping the MHRA to have more support and more funding, will be one way. The other way is to make sure that we continue to support at a university level with that earlier stage research, at an Innovate UK level with that sort of later stage research, so that we continue to bring through some of these AIs, especially the challenging AIs, through into the ecosystem.
Can you give us some examples, or are you aware of some examples that have come through CERSIs or that are starting to make their way through there?
They're actually a little bit new, unfortunately, to talk about examples. They only started sort of running early this year, so it's still early days. But they are, working on AI within healthcare. They are working on helping early stage innovators, especially. I'll give an example. There is one CERSI actually at your university at Brunel called the Radiant CERSI.
Okay.
Now, they are working specifically on helping early stage innovators to understand the regulatory landscape for AI. Because regulatory landscape is one of those things that innovators don't often think about early enough. They think about the technology, they think about how to make it work. What they don't think is actually, which country am I going to go to? How do I get adopted in that country? What do I need to do to get my regulatory approval? And if you think of that too late, all your technical work maybe even be wrong because you've gone the wrong direction. So the Radiant CERSI especially is, taking a real critical point in the supply chain and helping people to get that right early.
Okay. I mean, whenever people talk about, health and AI, invariably the issue comes around to data, because clearly you need data to run the AI systems and for AI to work. But we also know that certainly in the NHS, but even in companies in the private sector, data is very often fragmented. It's in different formats. what do you think some of the challenges are in bringing that data together to be able to make AI systems work more effectively in healthcare?
Well, the UK's got a quite a unique position here because we've
Hmm.
got huge amounts of data from the NHS over many, many years. But
Yes.
as you said, it is fairly unstructured in places, and it is all over the place. There's different sets of data in different parts of the country. Now, we've made a start to get this data to innovators and academics through the SDEs, or the secure data environments, which tend to be trust-based and tend to have different data sets within each of them. They also tend to be relatively unstructured. So there's a challenge. How do you actually find the data you want? How do you make sure that you are able to access that data? Now there is single front doors through the joint to the joint SDE network, but again, this will pass you on to an SDE and you'll get your data sets. Their Wellcome Trust in Cambridge have just set up a new centre, which has just had its funding to actually look at bringing these data sets together and being a real single front door to allow access to patient data. It was a significant amount of money. It was £100 million or so. So I'm yet to see exactly how they're going to move forward, but I would hope that it will pull the data sets together, give a single front door access, and also help to structure and label some of that data to make it easier for innovators. Now, there's the other slight challenge, apart from the interoperability and so on that you mentioned, is the economic model for accessing this data as well. SMEs who are usually very, very strong innovators don't always have those funds to buy the data, which may be the current way of engaging with the NHS. So being able to take equity, being able to have a profit share is another potential route that we really need to look at.
And I guess in keeping with this idea of data, the government accepted Matt Clifford's AI Opportunities Action Plan and the recommendations contained in the action plan, one of which is to create the National Data Library, particularly with bringing together those data sets that innovators can use to develop new products, new services. How do you see the National Data Library kind of fitting into this healthcare data management environment?
I think it's a very similar solution to Wellcome Trust.
Okay.
And I'll be very surprised if the two groups weren't talking to each other and making sure that we've got a uniform solution.
Okay. This may be a little bit of an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You know, Alex, I lift and shift you from this podcast into a boardroom of a company that's making medical devices. And the board members turn to you and say, Alex, what should our priorities be? We're trying to incorporate AI into our existing medical devices. What should we focus on? What should we do?
I'm assuming we're a fairly large corporate boardroom.
Let's start with large. I might move you to
Okay,
SMEs as well, but let's make that assumption. I'll go with it.
Oh, thank you. In a large corporate, the first thing I would do is say, we need to make sure that we have enough skilled people within our organization to actually understand what AI can do, and we need to have a strategic market strategy and team that is looking at where it would fit in best with our technologies, and then we need to look at those companies which have developed those technologies, which we could potentially acquire or work with, and at the same time build our skills internally, so that we can adopt that technology internally and then sell externally. If you allow me to be an SME,
Okay.
we'd be talking to the board, and I would be absolutely saying that we need to be considering AI within our products and services. Providing that SME is producing something like a diagnostic or something which AI could be really supportive. We need to be developing that in-house capability, and we need to be looking especially at how that regulatory process applies to us as we bring AI into our product. But we also need to figure out as to whether we significantly think AI will benefit our product or not. Some it may just be an add-on which makes it too complicated. So it may be a case that we really need to look at the cost benefit and whether we think that AI can significantly benefit our product as we move forward.
And I mean, clearly skills, and you're absolutely right in terms of having the right skills to be able to incorporate AI into the medical device. But I mean, what sorts of skills? Where would these skills come from? How should companies go about developing these skills?
There's a
Maybe
huge
buying them
gap.
in. I mean, this is a big area.
There's a huge gap in skills in the UK. And we've
Yes.
recently done a survey of hundreds of SMEs, and we kept getting told that there is a lack of skills in regulatory, lack of skills in market access, and so on. Now, AI and technical was not one of those skills that people say is missing. So there's a lot of people that understand coding and AI and so on, but there's very few people that understand what it means in a regulated environment to do AI and coding. It's very different to say we've got this cool app, let's add this AI to it, and it's amazing, it'll do stuff. When you're saying, actually, you know what, is that going to change the risk profile of my device? Is that going to start telling people to do thing A, which might cause problem B? So we really need those experts that understand regulatory, especially for software and AI, which is quite a challenge.
I agree. And do you think policymakers, do you think the government's doing enough? What should policymakers be doing to ensure that those skills are being developed?
I think we need to join together industry academic forums. We need industry to be speaking as much as they can to universities to talk about the specific skills that the industry needs. And this could be through an industry body like ABHI or BIVDA. But we need those universities like yourselves and other universities that work in this space to be ideally adopting their curriculum to include this kind of regulatory approach and so on. In terms of government, we just need government to have the funding in the right place to enable these sort of things to happen. And also we find sometimes if you have somebody like OLS or DSIT around the table alongside the academics and the industry, it actually helps to add some weight to the conversation. So, the easiest thing would be to say, help to bring these forums together. The more difficult thing would be to say, actually, can we have some cash to develop some programs?
Yeah. Alex, I'm going to just ask you to clarify. You used a number of acronyms there, ABHI, OLS, DSIT, but just explain the acronyms for a moment, please.
No, apologies, I live in acronyms. So the OLS is the Office for Life Sciences. The DSIT is the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology,
Yes.
and government departments, which essentially fund health and industry and so on. ABHI is the Association of British Health Tech Industries, which is a trade association, and BIVDA is the British IBD Association, which is also a trade association. So essentially, government, trade association, representing His Majesty's government, industry, and then obviously universities around the table would be key. And of course, catapults like CPI would be very happy to be part of that discussion as well. Now, catapults, you may ask me, is that kind of group of organizations which work in that middle space between invention and commercial market to help to do some translation.
So you work directly with organizations and businesses to develop them, is that right?
We do, yeah. So an SME or a spin-up from university might have an early product or a proof of concept, and we help them to develop and scale that and get it closer to market.
Okay. Any insights as to what products we can expect, or without giving away any IP or trade secrets? What sorts of developments can we be expecting?
Well, one of the things that we're doing, which we're very excited about, is bringing together lots of large corporates, academics, etc., to develop new molecular diagnostic systems for chronic diseases and cancer. So we are trying to fix the problems in the mid stage for cancer diagnostics and the late stage. And what I mean by this is there's loads of different kind of processes that you can follow with your diagnostic test to clean up the sample and before you get it into your machine. And there's lots of different kind of at the back end bioinformatics systems which all do different things. We're bringing industry together to get a uniform approach at both ends to help to translate some of those innovations much more quickly.
Well, so just extending that a little bit, with AI coming into medical devices, and in fact, some presumably, people completely reinventing some medical devices so that they start with AI rather than being an add-on to an existing device. I mean, where do you see this going over the next 3 to 5 years?
I see AI being used significantly more right across the different risk levels. I
Hmm.
see, every hospital in the UK using it to stratify patients and help to improve patient flow. I
Yeah.
see in the next sort of few years, doctors really starting to use those decision support tools, especially in areas where there's images and so on. You know, like when you break a bone or you're looking for sort of cancer in the body. Um, in terms of the actual healthcare system. When we look at the new diagnostics tests, the program I was talking about before with the bioinformatics, there is so much data when you look at things like different types of proteomics, genomics, all the different things in the body like proteins and genes.
Yeah.
Figuring out how they link to disease and all the thousands of genes and tens of thousands of proteins, it needs AI. A human can't do it on their own.
And I guess with that, the spread of AI coming into almost every aspect of healthcare, what are your thoughts in terms of organizations ensuring that, bias is kept to a minimum, transparency is made obvious and clear so that people, when a decision is taken by some AI system, whether a human is in the loop or not,
Mhm.
that decision is explainable. So these tricky issues of kind of bias, transparency, explainability, how do you see those playing out?
I think bias is one that we need to make it very clear that when we have trained our models on data
Hmm.
sets, that we are being diverse in our data set as possible. We're
Yeah.
looking at different ages, different races, whatever it is that we need to ensure that we've got the correct data set. I think we just need to have guidance to say what good looks like, because you can have 1 million people or 10,000 people. What does good look like for that data set? We need that guidance from the MHRA, which the system
Hmm.
could potentially help with. When we look at explainability, that's tougher. When you've got a large language model, even the people that write the models don't know exactly what is going on within that model. But there is tools that you can use where you can actually figure out how it's behaving. So you can start to take criteria out of the model and see what comes out. And there's various processes that are very well written up in academic journals to say if you do this and take this part out, you can actually understand that explainability. So there is processes that you can follow to give you a good level of confidence that there is some explainability in there.
I mean, that I guess some of these issues go to the heart of people having confidence in these devices. Not clearly the medics and people in the medical world need confidence, otherwise they're not going to use those devices, those tools, those systems. And then patients, people, the public need confidence, which means the systems have to be perceived as trustworthy. What should organizations be doing? What can the MHRA be doing to ensure that there is, that these devices are perceived as being trustworthy?
Well, I always find this quite an interesting question because I don't know about you, but I always assume that my doctor is trustworthy.
Yes.
Yeah. And, I assume that he's trustworthy or she's trustworthy because they have qualifications and they're on the general medical register, or if they're a dentist, they're on the general dental register.
Yeah.
So you're assuming that they're infallible, which they're humans. They can make mistakes. However, with AI, the first thing people think is, okay, prove to me this is okay. I think the best thing we can do is essentially have a kite mark or something which the MHRA or an independent body can give to AI models to actually say, I'm confident this is the right quality. So that people can look up that AI system on that equivalent of the general medical register and go, yep, that's got a number. I'm confident with that one.
Yeah. That's a very interesting thought. It'll be interesting to, in terms of trying to not just develop that kite mark, but then to ensure that companies, for some organizations, it's like getting a kite mark is like tick the box, move on. And we've got the kite mark, it sits on the website, but really everything else that happens kind of behind in the organization stays exactly the same. But if we can make that kite mark idea work, I think that would be a very interesting development. And you're right, it would raise the level of awareness and potentially people coming to using these devices a little more easily.
Absolutely. And it's just the same with a clinician. He or her has to continually go through continuous development. They still have to, I've got family members who are dentists, and they very frequently have to do CPR training and so on. They know how to do CPR. They've done it. They've done the training many times, but they still have to go and do it year after year to prove that they are still competent.
Yes.
Just the same with AI. We have post-market surveillance now as part of most regulations around the world. We have to look at how our medical devices are behaving once they're on the market. So we're continually checking to make sure nothing is changing and going wrong. So in order to maintain your cut mark, you have to prove you're following a post-market surveillance and making any adjustments to your model that is necessary.
Alex, thank you so much for joining the AI Adoption Podcast. You've given us some fascinating insights into the world of AI in medical devices, and some insights as well into where some of this is going. So I very much appreciate you joining me today, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.